Hey, and welcome to Puzzlehead. This channel is all about engaging stories with clever twists, unexpected turns, and moments that will pull you in emotionally. So if you enjoy drama, surprises, and endings that truly hit, then you're in the right place. Subscribe and join us for stories full of secrets, intense moments, and satisfying outcomes. Now, don't forget to turn on notifications. The next puzzle is about to begin. The keys scraped against metal that didn't recognize it anymore. I stood there on my own front porch at 2 in the morning, fresh off a red-eye from Denver, staring at a shiny new deadbolt that gleamed like a middle finger under the porch light I'd installed myself 3 years ago. Through the living room window, I could see my wife, Natalie, curled up on my leather couch, the one I'd saved 6 months to buy, laughing at something on my 75-inch Samsung. She wasn't alone. Some guy in a polo shirt sat close enough to share her wine glass, close enough to smell her perfume, close enough to be exactly where I should have been after 3 weeks of electrical work in Colorado. My phone buzzed. Text message. Found someone better. Collect your things next week. Nat. I read it twice. Then I photographed the new deadbolt with my phone's camera, making sure to capture the timestamp and location data. Old habits from construction disputes die hard. Document everything. The guy on my couch said something that made Natalie throw her head back and laugh. She was drinking my Macallan 18, the bottle I'd been saving for our anniversary next month. They looked comfortable, settled in, like they'd been playing house for more than one evening. I typed back, "Are you sure about that?" 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. I could practically see her panic through the glass. Could imagine her scrambling to explain to polo shirt guy why her husband was texting instead of pounding on the door like any normal betrayed spouse would do. I pocketed my phone and walked back to my truck. Started the engine, drove to the Marriott downtown, and booked their best suite. Ordered room service, steak, lobster, that expensive wine they keep behind the bar. Charged it all to the credit card that was about to become very, very important. See, Natalie married a quiet electrician, union guy with steady paychecks and calloused hands who said, "Yes, dear, and whatever you want, honey," for 15 years. What she'd never bothered to notice was that this quiet electrician had built a commercial contracting business, held licenses in 4 states, and owned everything that mattered in our life together. Starting tomorrow, she was about to learn the difference between a man who works with his hands and a man who works with his head. The next morning, I sat in my lawyer's office, drinking coffee that cost more per cup than most people spend on lunch. Richard Hawkins had handled my business contracts for 8 years. And he'd drawn up our prenup back when Natalie thought marriage contracts were romantic instead of practical. "Ben, I have to ask, are you sure about this?" Richard flipped through the file, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "These are nuclear options. Once we start, there's no going back." "She changed the locks on my house, Richard. She's drinking my whiskey with another man on my couch. I'd say she already made the choice about going back." He nodded slowly. "The house is titled in your family trust. Her name isn't on the deed, the mortgage, or any of the utility accounts. She signed the prenup after her attorney reviewed it. I have his signature confirming he explained every clause, including the abandonment provision, especially that, if either party voluntarily leaves the marital home and establishes residence elsewhere, they forfeit any claim to the property." He looked up at me. "Changing the locks and telling you to collect your things next week legally constitutes abandonment and constructive eviction. And her legal residence? According to the prenup, her mother's house on Maple Street. That's where she lived before the marriage. That's where she's registered to vote. That's where all legal notices will be served." I leaned back in the leather chair. "What about the boyfriend?" "Trevor Donnelly. I had my investigator run a basic background check after you called last night." Richard slid a folder across his desk. "Sales manager at Morrison Equipment. Decent salary, but he's leveraged to his eyeballs. The BMW is financed at 18% interest. The downtown condo is a rental. His credit score is somewhere between terrible and catastrophic." So Natalie traded up from a man who owns a house to a man who can't qualify for an apartment lease. It appears that way. The question is, how far do you want to take this? I thought about Natalie's laugh, about the way she'd curled her feet under her on my couch like she owned the place, about 15 years of marriage that she'd ended with a text message while I was 2,000 miles away working to pay for the life she'd decided wasn't good enough anymore. All the way, Richard. Every legal option we have. He made a note in his file. I'll start the paperwork. Divorce on grounds of abandonment and infidelity, asset protection filings, utility account notifications, the whole package. How long before she realizes what's happening? Oh, she'll know tonight. I'm having the power company flag the account for unauthorized occupancy. The water department will follow tomorrow. Gas and internet by Friday. And if she calls the police? They'll explain property law and suggest she contact an attorney, which will be expensive, considering she'll need to pay a retainer with money from accounts she's about to lose access to. I stood up and shook his hand. Send me the bills, Richard, all of them. This is going to be worth every penny. That afternoon, I drove past the house. My house. Natalie's car was gone, probably at work, but Trevor's BMW sat in my driveway like it belonged there. I called my friend Jack Russo, who owned Russo's Gym and Bar downtown. Jack, I need a favor, and maybe a drink. Ben, thought you were in Colorado for another week. Plans changed. Meet me at your place in an hour. I'll explain everything. Jack had been a cop for 20 years before opening his bar. He understood the difference between legal and illegal, between justice and revenge, between what you could do and what you should do. More importantly, he understood that sometimes a man needs to remind the world that being quiet doesn't mean being weak. So she changed the locks, Jack said after I'd finished the story. He poured 2 fingers of bourbon into heavy glasses and sent you a text message from my own couch. Jesus, what kind of man lets another guy's wife kick him out of his own house? The kind who doesn't know he owns it. Jack laughed, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. You want my advice? Make her famous. Small town like this, reputation matters. Let everyone know exactly what kind of woman Natalie Kramer really is. I'm not looking to destroy her, Jack. I just want my life back. Ben, she destroyed your marriage with a text message. She's living in your house with another man. She's telling everyone who'll listen that she traded up. He leaned forward. You think she's going to quietly move out and apologize? Or do you think she's going to fight dirty and try to take half of everything you've built? I knew the answer. I'd known it the moment I saw that new deadbolt. Natalie wasn't the type to go quietly. She'd hired a lawyer by now, probably told him some sob story about an abusive husband and a house she'd helped pay for. She'd fight for everything she could get, and she'd make me look like the villain for wanting to keep what was mine. What do you suggest? Document everything, every lie she tells, every move she makes, every penny she spends. And when the time comes, make sure the whole town knows the truth. My phone buzzed. Another text from Natalie. We need to talk. This is ridiculous. I showed Jack the message. He grinned. Text her back. Tell her you're busy, but she's welcome to call your attorney. I typed, can't talk right now. Richard Hawkins is handling my affairs. His number is 555-0147. The response came back immediately. Your attorney? Ben, this is insane. I just need some space to figure things out. You had space, my house. You chose to fill it with someone else. It's not like that. Trevor is just a friend. I almost laughed. A friend who drinks your husband's whiskey and sleeps on your husband's couch while your husband is working out of state. I'd seen a lot of things in my 48 years, but I'd never seen friendship that intimate. Glad to hear it. I'm sure Trevor can help you figure things out at your mother's house. The phone went quiet. Jack raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. To old foundations, I replied. The kind that don't crumble when someone tries to build on them without permission. At exactly 6:47 p.m., every light in my house went dark. I was sitting in my truck across the street eating a sandwich and watching through the windows. Natalie and Trevor had been cooking dinner in my kitchen, using my pots and pans, making themselves comfortable. Then the power died, and the comfortable evening became something else entirely. Natalie's silhouette appeared at the front window, phone pressed to her ear. Even from 50 yards away, I could see her gesturing wildly. Trevor's shadow joined her, and I could imagine the conversation, the confusion, the growing panic as they realized this wasn't a neighborhood outage. My phone rang. Natalie. Ben, the power's out. Did you have the power turned off? The power company requires account holder authorization for service to continue. Since you changed the locks and told me to collect my things next week, I assumed you'd made arrangements with the utility companies. You can't do this. This is my home.
According to the deed, it's my home. According to your text message, you've found somewhere better to live. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Through the window, I could see Trevor pacing back and forth, his phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. He was probably calling his friends, looking for a place to stay, realizing that his romantic evening had turned into a camping trip. Natalie, you made a choice. You chose to lock me out of my own house. You chose to move another man into my bedroom. You chose to end our marriage with a text message. I'm just respecting your choices. I never said I wanted a divorce. You said you found someone better. What exactly did you think that meant? The line went quiet except for her breathing. In the background, I could hear Trevor saying something urgent, probably suggesting they leave. Smart man. Too bad he wasn't smart enough to avoid married women in the first place. Ben, please, can we just talk about this like adults? We can talk tomorrow at Richard Hawkins' office. He's my attorney now. Your attorney? Ben, this is insane. We can work this out. Bring Trevor if you want. I'm sure he has opinions about our marriage. I hung up and started my truck. As I drove away, I could see flashlight beams moving around inside the house. Two people stumbling through rooms they'd thought they owned, learning the hard way that comfort is a privilege, not a right. The next morning, I met with Richard again. He had updates. The eviction notice was served this morning. Certified mail to her mother's address, as required by law. She has 72 hours to vacate the premises. What if she refuses? Then the sheriff will remove her. But I don't think it'll come to that. I got a call from her attorney an hour ago. She hired someone? David Morrison. Good lawyer, extensive. He wanted to discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? He's claiming she has a common law interest in the house. Says she contributed to household expenses and improvements over the years. I laughed. With what money? She spent every penny she made on clothes and spa treatments. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, the taxes, everything. That's what I told him. I also mentioned that we have 15 years of bank records showing exactly where every dollar came from and where it went. What did he say to that? He said he'd call back. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. This is Trevor. We need to meet. This has gone far enough. I showed Richard the message. He raised an eyebrow. The boyfriend wants to negotiate? Apparently. What are you going to tell him? I thought about it for a moment. Trevor Donnelly had seemed so confident, sitting on my couch, drinking my whiskey, laughing with my wife. I wondered how confident he'd feel sitting across from me in a public place, trying to explain why I should let him keep living in my house. I'm going to tell him to meet me at Jack's bar tonight. 7 o'clock. Ben, be careful. Don't do anything that could be construed as threatening or intimidating. Richard, I'm going to buy the man a drink and have a conversation. What could be more civilized than that? That evening, I arrived at Russo's gym and bar 15 minutes early. Jack had saved me a corner booth where I could see the door and most of the room. The place was busy. Construction workers, cops, firefighters, the kind of men who understood that some things were worth fighting for and some fights were worth winning. Trevor walked in at exactly 7 o'clock. He looked around nervously, clearly out of his element in a blue-collar bar where the beer came in bottles and the conversation came with opinions. He spotted me and walked over, his polo shirt and khakis making him look like a Lost Country Club member. Ben Kramer? That's right. Have a seat, Trevor. Can I buy you a drink? He sat down carefully, like the booth might be contaminated. I'll have a beer, whatever's fine. I signaled Jack, who brought over 2 bottles of Budweiser and a bowl of peanuts. Trevor looked at the beer like it might bite him. So, I said, you wanted to talk. This situation has gotten out of hand. Natalie is devastated. She's staying with her mother, crying all the time, barely eating. That's unfortunate. Maybe she should have thought about that before she changed my locks. Look, I know how this looks, but it's not what you think. Natalie and I are just friends. She was lonely, you were gone all the time. She needed someone to talk to. And you volunteered to talk to her on my couch, drinking my whiskey while I was working out of state. Trevor shifted in his seat. Nothing happened. We're just friends. Trevor, let me explain something to you. I've been married for 15 years. I know what my wife looks like when she's just talking to a friend. I also know what she looks like when she's not. He took a sip of beer and grimaced, probably used to craft IPAs and imported lagers. What do you want me to do? I want you to stay away from my wife. I want you to stay away from my house. I want you to disappear from our lives completely. And if I don't? I leaned forward. Trevor, do you know what I do for a living? Natalie said you're an electrician. I'm a commercial electrical contractor. I wire office buildings, factories, shopping centers. I know every electrician, plumber, HVAC tech, and building inspector in this city. I know which restaurants pass health inspections and which ones don't. I know which apartment complexes are up to code and which ones cut corners. Trevor's face went pale. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining the facts of life in a small city. Reputation matters. Word travels fast. And right now, you're the guy who's sleeping with another man's wife while he's out of town working. I told you, we're not sleeping together. Trevor, it doesn't matter what you're actually doing. It matters what everyone thinks you're doing. And right now, everyone thinks you're a homewrecker. I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot from Facebook. It was a post from one of Natalie's friends. Some people that have no shame, stealing another woman's husband while he's working out of state. You know who you are. The post had 43 comments and growing. Jesus, Trevor whispered. It gets worse. My friend Jack here, he knows every cop in the city. They drink here after their shifts. They talk about their cases. They remember faces. Your face is going to be very memorable. You can't do this. I'm not doing anything, Trevor. You did this when you decided to move into another man's house. I'm just letting nature take its course. Trevor stood up abruptly, knocking over his beer bottle. The amber liquid spread across the table and dripped onto the floor. Every head in the bar turned to look at us. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. He stormed out, leaving the smell of fear and spilled beer behind him. Jack walked over with a towel to clean up the mess. How'd that go? He asked. Better than expected. I think Trevor's about to realize that being the other man isn't as much fun when the husband fights back. My phone buzzed. Text message from Natalie. Trevor told me what you said. You're scaring him. I typed back, good. Maybe he'll be smart enough to stay away from married women in the future. Ben, please, we can fix this. Natalie, you broke it. You can't fix what you don't own. I finished my beer and headed home. To my house, to my couch, to my life that was finally starting to feel like mine again. Friday morning brought the water shutoff notice. By noon, Trevor's BMW was gone from my driveway. And by evening, Natalie was calling me every 20 minutes. Ben, you have to turn the water back on. I can't live like this. You're not living there, Natalie. You're trespassing. There's a difference. This is insane. I'm your wife. My wife wouldn't change the locks on our house. My wife wouldn't move another man into our bedroom. You're someone else now. Someone I don't recognize. I was sitting in my hotel room, room service dinner spread out on the table, watching the news and fielding her increasingly frantic calls. Richard had advised me to let everything go to voicemail, but I was curious to hear how her story changed as the pressure mounted. Where am I supposed to shower? Where am I supposed to use the bathroom? Your mother's house has both. I'm sure she's thrilled to have you back home. I can't stay there. She's driving me crazy with questions. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to play house with Trevor. Trevor's gone. He won't return my calls. Are you happy now? I was, actually. Happier than I'd been in months. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life instead of just working to pay for someone else's dreams. Natalie, let me ask you something. When you changed those locks, what did you think was going to happen? Did you think I'd just disappear? Did you think I'd keep paying for a house I wasn't allowed to enter? I thought you'd fight for me. Fight for you? Against who? Against Trevor? Against your own choices? The line went quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, younger, like the woman I'd married 15 years ago. I made a mistake, Ben. I know that now. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work it out. Some mistakes can't be fixed, Natalie. Some choices can't be undone. So that's it? 15 years of marriage and you're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm accepting reality. You gave up when you changed my locks. You gave up when you moved another man into our house. You gave up when you sent me that text message. Saturday morning, the eviction notice expired. I drove to the house with a locksmith and a sheriff's deputy. The deputy was Mike Rodriguez, a guy I'd known since high school. Ben, I'm sorry about this, Mike said as we walked up to the front door. Heard about what happened. That's rough. It is what it is, Mike. I just want to get back into my own house. The locksmith made quick work of the new deadbolt, and we went inside. The place was a mess. Dishes in the sink, clothes scattered around the bedroom, empty wine bottles on the kitchen counter. It looked like a college dorm room, not the home I'd spent 15 years building. In the bedroom, I found evidence of Trevor's extended stay. Men's clothes in the closet and toiletries in the bathroom, a bottle of cologne on my dresser. Natalie had moved fast, but not fast enough to cover her tracks. "You want me to bag this stuff as evidence?" Mike asked. "Just the boyfriend's things. Put them in garbage bags and leave them on the front porch. If he wants them back, he can come get them." We spent 2 hours cleaning up and documenting everything. Mike took photos of the men's clothing, the toiletries, the empty bottles, evidence of infidelity and abandonment if it came to that in court. As we were finishing up, Natalie's car pulled into the driveway. She got out slowly like she was approaching a crime scene and walked up to the front door where 3 garbage bags of Trevor's belongings sat waiting. "Ben," she said quietly, "can we talk?" "We can talk, but not inside. This is my house now." She looked at the garbage bags, at the sheriff's deputy, at the locksmith putting new keys on my key ring. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Your mother's house. Your attorney's office. Anywhere but here. I don't have any money. You closed all the accounts." "I closed the joint accounts. Your attorney said you were claiming common law interest in my property. I figured you'd want to be financially independent while you pursued that claim." Mike cleared his throat. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises. The eviction notice has been executed and you're no longer authorized to be here." Natalie looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, but something like genuine fear. For the first time, she was realizing that actions have consequences, that choices have prices, that the quiet electrician she'd married wasn't as helpless as she'd thought. "Ben, please, I'm begging you, don't do this." "I'm not doing anything, Natalie. I'm just living in my own house, sleeping in my own bed, sitting on my own couch. You know, all the things I couldn't do when you changed the locks." She picked up one of the garbage bags and threw it at my truck. It burst open, scattering Trevor's clothes across the driveway. A polo shirt landed on my windshield, and a pair of boxers caught on the antenna. "There's your evidence of her mental state," Mike said quietly. "I'll put that in my report." Natalie realized what she'd done and tried to gather up the scattered clothes, but the wind was picking them up and blowing them around the yard. She looked ridiculous, chasing Trevor's underwear across the lawn while Mike and I watched from the porch. "Ma'am, you need to leave now," Mike said, "before I have to arrest you for disturbing the peace." She gave up on the clothes and got back in her car. As she drove away, I could see her crying, her shoulders shaking as she turned the corner and disappeared from view. "You okay, Ben?" Mike asked. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. This is going to get ugly, you know. Divorce always does." "It's already ugly, Mike. I'm just cleaning up the mess." That evening, I sat on my couch, drinking my whiskey and watching my TV in my house. For the first time in weeks, everything was exactly where it belonged, including me. My phone rang. Jack Russo. "Ben, you need to get down here, now." "What's wrong?" "Natalie and Trevor are here. They're drunk, they're loud, and they're telling everyone who will listen that you're an abusive psychopath who threw your wife out on the street. I'll be right there." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. It was time for the final confrontation, the moment when everything I'd built over the past week either held together or fell apart. Either way, it was going to be interesting. Russo's gym and bar was packed when I arrived. Friday night crowd, construction workers and cops and firefighters all clustered around tables, drinking beer and telling stories. But tonight was different. Tonight, everyone was listening to the same story, and it was being told by my wife and her boyfriend at the bar. "He's a monster," Natalie was saying, her voice slurred and too loud. 15 years of marriage, and he throws me out like garbage. What kind of man does that to his own wife?" Trevor nodded along, his arm around her shoulders. "Guy's got serious control issues. Turned off the power, turned off the water, had the sheriff throw her out, all because she wanted a little space to think." I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them perform for their audience. Some of the guys looked uncomfortable. They knew me, knew my reputation, knew I wasn't the type to misuse anyone. But others were nodding along, buying the story of the poor abandoned wife and her protective boyfriend. Jack saw me and walked over. "They've been at it for an hour," he said quietly. "Getting worse by the minute. Anyone believing them? Some, enough to cause problems." I walked through the crowd toward the bar. Conversations stopped as I passed. Heads turned, whispers followed in my wake. By the time I reached Natalie and Trevor, the entire room was watching. "Evening, folks," I said, signaling the bartender. "Jack, can I get a beer? And whatever they're drinking." Natalie spun around on her stool, nearly falling off. "Ben, what are you doing here? Having a drink in my friend's bar. Same as you." Trevor stood up, puffing out his chest. The booze had given him courage he didn't possess sober. "You've got some nerve showing up here after what you did." "What did I do, Trevor? You threw your wife out of her own home. You had her arrested." "I had her evicted from my home. There's a difference." The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. Jack moved behind the bar, ready to break up trouble if it started. Mike Rodriguez was there too, off-duty but still a cop, still watching everything with professional interest. "It's her home too," Trevor said. "She lived there for 15 years. She lived there as my wife when she decided she didn't want to be my wife anymore. She lost the privilege of living there." "She never said she didn't want to be your wife." I pulled out my phone and read Natalie's text message out loud. "Found someone better. Collect your things next week." I looked around the room. That sound like a woman who wants to stay married? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The story was getting more complicated and people were starting to reassess what they'd heard. "She was confused," Trevor said. "She was lonely. You were never home." "I was working in Colorado, earning money to pay for the house she locked me out of. You could have gotten a hotel room." I laughed, and the sound carried across the room. "Trevor, let me make sure I understand this. I should have gotten a hotel room so you could sleep in my bed with my wife in my house that I pay for? It's not like that. Then what's it like? Explain it to everyone here. Tell them exactly what it's like." Trevor looked around the room, realizing that the crowd had shifted. The faces that had been sympathetic a few minutes ago were now skeptical, waiting for an explanation that made sense. "We're just friends," he said weakly. "Friends who change locks together, friends who drink 15-year-old scotch together, friends who sleep on the same couch together. We never slept together. Then why did I find your clothes in my bedroom closet? Why was your cologne on my dresser? Why were your boxers in my laundry basket?" The room went completely quiet. Even the music from the jukebox seemed to fade into background noise. Trevor's face went white, then red, then white again. It wasn't what, Trevor? It wasn't infidelity. It wasn't trespassing. It wasn't theft of services when you used my electricity and water and Natalie finally spoke up, her voice small and broken. "Ben, please don't do this here. You did this here, Natalie. You came into my friend's bar and told everyone I was an abusive monster. You made this public. I'm just setting the record straight." I turned to address the room. "How many of you know me? How many of you have worked with me, drunk with me, watched football with me?" Hands went up around the room, more than half the crowd. "Anyone here ever see me misuse my wife? Anyone ever see me lose my temper, hit anyone, threaten anyone?" Heads shook. Voices called out, "No, never. Ben's good people. But I come home from 3 weeks of work to find my wife has changed my locks and moved another man into my house, so I use the legal system to get my property back. That make me a monster?" "No!" came the response from multiple voices. I turned back to Trevor. "You want to know what makes someone a monster? Moving into another man's house while he's working out of state, drinking his whiskey, sleeping in his bed, convincing his wife to throw away 15 years of marriage for a guy who can't afford his own apartment. That's not... Trevor, what's your credit score?" "What?" "Your credit score. The number that determines whether you can get a loan, rent an apartment, buy a car. What is it?" He didn't answer. "I'll tell you what it is. It's 487. That's why you drive a financed BMW at 18% interest. That's why you rent a condo instead of owning a house. That's why you moved in with my wife instead of getting your own place." The crowd was turning ugly now, not toward me, but toward Trevor. These were working men who understood the value of ownership, who respected the difference between earning something and taking it. "You're a parasite," someone called out. "Home wrecker," came another voice. Trevor looked around desperately, realizing he'd lost the room completely. "Come on, Nat, let's get out of here." But Natalie wasn't moving. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not anger, not fear, but something like recognition. Like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in years. "Ben," she said quietly, I'm sorry. For which part, Natalie? For changing the locks, for moving him in, for the text message, for coming here tonight and calling me a monster? Which part are you sorry for? All of it. Everything. I made a mistake. You made a choice. There's a difference. Trevor grabbed her arm. Nat, we're leaving. Now. She pulled away from him. No. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of lying. She turned to face the crowd. My husband is not a monster. He's not abusive. He's the most decent man I've ever known, and I threw it all away for... She looked at Trevor with disgust. For this. Trevor's face went red. Nat, what are you doing? I'm telling the truth for the first time in months. You're a loser, Trevor. You're broke, you're selfish, and you're a coward. I convinced myself you were an upgrade, but you're not even in the same league as my husband. You witch! Trevor raised his hand like he was going to slap her. He never got the chance. 3 men grabbed him before his hand could fall, and Mike Rodriguez was there with handcuffs before Trevor could struggle. Attack in the 3rd degree, Mike said, clicking the cuffs into place. Threatening behavior, public intoxication. You're done for the night, pal. As Mike led Trevor away, the crowd began to disperse. The show was over, the drama concluded, the truth finally told. People went back to their drinks and their conversations, but the energy in the room had changed. Justice had been served, order restored. Natalie sat alone at the bar, tears streaming down her face. I walked over and sat down beside her. That was quite a speech, I said. It was true, every word. I know. Can you ever forgive me? I thought about it for a long moment. Thought about 15 years of marriage, about the house we'd built together, about the life we'd shared. Thought about the new deadbolt and the text message and the empty scotch bottle. Forgiveness is one thing, Natalie. Trust is something else entirely. What does that mean? It means you can stay at your mother's house until the divorce is final. It means you can have your clothes and your personal belongings. It means I won't fight you on spousal support within reason. And us? There is no us anymore. You made sure of that when you chose Trevor over 15 years of marriage. She nodded, accepting the verdict. What happens now? Now you figure out how to rebuild your life. And I figure out how to enjoy mine. I left her sitting at the bar and walked out into the night. The air was cool and clean, full of possibilities. Tomorrow I would move back into my house permanently. I would sleep in my own bed, cook in my own kitchen, sit on my own couch. For the first time in months, everything was exactly where it belonged. Epilogue, the foundation holds. 6 months later, the divorce was final. Natalie got spousal support for 2 years, enough to get back on her feet, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to. She moved to another city, took a job with a smaller firm, started over with a clean slate and hard-learned lessons. Trevor Donnelly was convicted of attack and served 30 days in county jail. His employer fired him, his condo lease was terminated, and his BMW was repossessed. Last I heard, he was living with his mother and working at a call center. I kept the house, of course. My house, built with my hands, paid for with my work, titled in my name. I also kept the business, the trucks, the tools, and the reputation I'd spent 25 years building. But most importantly, I kept the knowledge that I'd fought for what was mine and won. People in town still talk about that night at Russo's bar, about the quiet electrician who turned out to be not so quiet when pushed too far. They talk about the importance of knowing the difference between what you earn and what you take, between what you own and what you think you deserve. They talk about the foundation of a man's life and how it either holds under pressure or crumbles when tested. Mine held. I'm sitting on my couch now, drinking my whiskey, watching my TV in my house. The locks are changed, I changed them myself. But this time, I'm the only one with the key. And that's exactly how it should be.